I love that you can share your screen now on YouTube Live. That's really exciting. Okay, we're doing an astrology live today on YouTube. And if this is your first time connecting with me, hello. I'm Esoteric Essa, published astrologer, published writer. I do have a Patreon account that we talk a lot in depth about the current astrology and a lot of taboo subjects with astrology and how it's merging with society and seeing the occult shift in our modern society. But this live in particular, I am discussing the May full moon. So we have back to back full moons in the month of May. I want to get into that and what the official shift of in Gemini means for all signs, for the collective, for consciousness. Um, yeah, so the first full moon is in Scorpio on May 1st. So we start the month with the Scorpio full moon. And we have the new moon in Taurus on May 16th. We then have a second full moon on May 31st in the sign of Sagittarius. So when we have two full moons consecutively, meaning back to back in 1 month, and in this case, we have two full moons in the month of May, the second full moon is then astrologically coined as a blue full moon, a blue moon. Now, a blue moon will only be referenced to a full moon lunar cycle, never to a new moon cycle, only to full moons. And again, it has to be consecutive. So, blue full moons happen every 2.5 years. They're not necessarily that rare or that common. I like to describe them as such. They don't happen that often, but it's not like this super, super rare occurrence, but it's obviously very significant. So, what we're seeing the month of May for everybody, regardless of zodiac sign, you are closing out cycles from the last 2.5 years. So, go back to 2023, 2024, post pandemic, right after COVID, we were getting back into society. And I think how fitting, right? What was happening in your life during those years? What was ending? Because we just had the ecliptic axis and the nodes those years wrap up Scorpio and Taurus and then shift into Aries and Libra. So, specifically, May is a significant month for Aries Libra placements. Even if you're not a sun sign, you have personal planets, right? Like moon or rising. And of course, the nodes in your chart if you have them. And for Taurus and Scorpio people, Taurus people and Scorpio people particularly, you just wrapped up Uranus, right? The last 7 years, all fixed signs rather. Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius. The last 7 years were about major transformation and personal revolution for you, but particularly Taurus, Scorpio, Aries, and Libras. This May month is going to help you close out cycles. Now, let's say you don't have those zodiac signs in your personal planets. That's still, it doesn't restrict you from experiencing the magic and the events that could occur in your life in May with the full moons. So just regardless what was happening in your life in 2023 and 2024, the full moons this month are going to help you, I guess, karmically close out any lingering energetic cycles as it relates to those years. Now, everyone's timeline is different. What happened in your life personally is going to vary. So, a blue full moon, the phenomena of that one is in Sagittarius on May 31st, and that one's going to be more potent than the May 1st Scorpio one. But the May 1st Scorpio full moon, because it's in the sign of Scorpio, we just talked about how it takes us back to COVID, pandemic times, wrapping up a cycle when the nodes were literally in Scorpio. So here we are with another Scorpio energy with the full moon on May 1st. And we know that Scorpio is about revelations within the dark psyche. So we might see new studies, new topics, more open conversations about um, occultism, psychological work. We could probably see a rise again in darker arts, darker cinema, like horror, gore, and that translate into literature, cinema, TV, film, just the artistic world. And those kind of topics and niches, artists and creatives and businesses getting a boost by the full moon and getting some notoriety. And then the Sagittarius blue full moon is going to make us revisit travel, which is quite fitting because now that Uranus is in Gemini, we're going to revisit the dialogue of travel, anyways, wanting to go back to nostalgia and novelty and how that relates to mercurial things because it's in Gemini. But Sagittarius is the main ruler of travel. Uranus is a planet of travel. So this full moon in Sagittarius, we might see foreign lands, other cross-cultural relations. So other countries get more involved globally with what's happening across the board in humanity, in humanitarian efforts, in mainstream media, in politics. We could see other countries making significant humanitarian strides, efforts, um, the first of different kinds, establishing different guidelines or upholding regulations. So we could see that full moon also um, maybe even, because if you think of the pandemic, we couldn't travel. We had to hunker down. We had to literally stay in our homes. And recently, if you're an American, a United States American citizen, travel hasn't been that easy for various things. And I talk more about this in detail, uncensored, on my Patreon account. I have to be very demure with what I say on here because, algorithm and I just want to make sure that my dog is like really wanting to come up. No, no, I'm working, honey. So we might see people with this full moon not go out as much, even for commerce and for the economy. People are going to do more local travel. So maybe tourist places like tourism in Vegas is going to plummet and go down. People aren't really traveling to Florida to go to Disneyland. It's like, because Gemini is the third house. So it's like your true local environment, it's your neighborhood. And it's maybe people are just trading luxurious travel and they're going to farmers markets instead, or wanting to do local tourism on foot tours, bike tours, biking events in parks, just where there's still mobility happening, there's still movement, they're still traveling, but it's short distance, it's localized. And again, it's still kind of confined to the immediate environment. So that's sort of like a broader spectrum of what we can anticipate with the full moon. Um, Now, Uranus and Gemini as a whole. So this is interesting because Uranus again is very fast. Gemini is very fast. So Uranus and Gemini together are they can keep up with each other. They're two sprinters, if they're in Aries and all the planets in Aries, like this year, 2026, you can agree probably is flying by incredibly quick because we have a lot of fire energy, a lot of air energy. So people who are mutable signs, and again, it doesn't have to be just your sun sign, but sun sign people in particular, and then if you have at least your big three in the mutables, which the mutables are Sagittarius, Gemini, Virgo, and Pisces, because Uranus is in Gemini, it eventually is probably now or eventually within the 7 years, going to create a square to your sun sign or any personal signs, personal planets, rising sign. Um, it's going to create a square. So what that does is Uranus squaring is creating essentially, especially to the sun, it's an identity shift. So let's say again, you don't have a sun sign in a mutable, but you have it as a rising or as your moon. You are still going to feel the next 7 years of this transit where you're going to have at least one or a couple of personal revolutionary personality shifts, outgrowing different versions of the personality, outgrowing different versions of your identity, and shifting into more of a self assured, more confident understanding of who you are, because Uranus and Gemini, regardless of the sign, is assisting all of us with radicalizing, revolutionizing, changing our critical thinking skills, and critical thinking skills being challenged. And quite frankly, common sense, not everyone has common sense. Not everyone has the ability to critically think, right? Cognitive bias is very real. Groupthink is very real. So Uranus and Gemini is doing this tug of war of revealing where there's tons of groupthink, revealing where maybe the conscious collective needs to embrace more of, independent thought, break through cognitive biases. But then because Pluto's in Aquarius with Uranus and Gemini, the rising tech, the rising AI, artificial intelligence, chat GPT, right? The lack of skills being used, people getting lazy, Googling, right? I mean, if you're a millennial and older, right, the new generations don't know what it was like to write 2-page essays as a rough draft just to get told you got to write a final draft and handwritten again, right? So this newer generation is going to be provoked with having to go back and forth with balancing either very niche, extremist, radicalized cult like thinking with Uranus and Gemini. And then the other end of the spectrum is creating new thought concepts, new languages, new ideologies. We will see influential people appear on the platforms of literacy, literature, poetry, writers, authors. And those are the leaders right now, educators, public speakers. Those are the leaders right now who are going to be helping in this wild west of AI, bring in these new laws and guidelines as we explore this new realm with, a lot of people's written work and intellectual property getting plagiarized or not attributed and sourced just by people in general online, or even through chat GPT or, other AI services. But we will see things like Claude still stick around. It's not going anywhere with Uranus and Gemini. The other point I wanted to bring up with Uranus and Gemini is actually, I have a timer going on. It's people probably being more sensitive to their local environments, like the pollution, the weather, because Uranus and Gemini is about wind, weather, electricity, and then eventually Saturn goes into Taurus in about 2.5 years. But now, right, Uranus and Gemini is there for 7 years. Now we'll see more like new sensitivities to skin disease, eczema, sinus, pollen. Again, the environment around us changing because of the climate crisis and climate change. And so with Uranus and Gemini, people might be relocating or uprooting families, or just, if they were on they were on the West Coast all their life, now they moved to the East Coast for a better environment, for cleaner air. I don't know if you can get cleaner air on the East Coast. Maybe like way up north on the East Coast, like next to the Canada borderline, possibly. But with Uranus and Gemini, we are going to see, again, our local environment, us wanting to care for it. So it's a great time to organize meetups, events that are charitable, volunteer work to clean up parks, clean up beaches, plant trees, Again, we're going to be super focused on pollution and smog, the quality of air we breathe with Uranus and Gemini. So a lot of people are going to get really involved in their community and want to see how they can actively create, again, better quality of life around them. Um, we might even see, especially people who are in Los Angeles, they had the fires last year, January of last year. Oh my God, isn't that crazy? The top of 2025. So, especially people in California, there's going to be a big discussion, especially because, we have the mayoral race, the election of new governors, and we had the fires. What did we really do to the land to help support the land? What are we doing to help be proactive with natural disasters? And natural disasters nationally for people in the United States of America is going to be a big topic with Uranus and Gemini, because Uranus and Gemini is wind and electrical currents. So we might see an uprise in tornadoes, high winds. People in LA naturally get the Santa Ana winds every year. I mean, we're seeing that get aggressive over time. Stagecoach was canceled because of the high winds. Coachella the weekend before that was experiencing high winds. Um, I'm actually cooking in the middle of this. I'm making my dinner. Um, okay, I'm making some rice and chicken. So we've already been seeing, right? Coachella and Stagecoach was not too long ago. It was the end of April. Uranus officially entered Gemini April 25th. So how timely is that, right? Astrology also can help us understand, obviously, better our planet. There's medical astrology. Astrology is not just limited to horoscopes and to love, although those are very fun subjects and topics. But with Uranus and Gemini, we might see wind, going back and revisiting the technology of wind to generate electricity, because Gemini is electricity. So EV, there's going to be popularity in electric vehicles, solar panels again. I think it was quite interesting that this administration has been trying to proactively attack solar companies, solar panels, and even at one point, the electric vehicle industry before, Musk, at one point was teaming up with the administration, and they had good relations to smooth that out. But we see now with the rise in gas because of what's happening in Iran, the war currently. So obviously, to charge an electric vehicle, it is considerably more affordable and cheaper to drive EV when you have ongoing fossil fuel wars, right? And the price of fossil fuel is high. And once we have Saturn go into Taurus in the next 2.5 years, we're going to have to globally revisit automobiles and manufacturers and companies just really embracing the electrical vehicle industry, and more advancements, more options, more vehicles available for the consumer to purchase, and it no longer kind of be this very niche novelty kind of industry or buyer consumer. So right now it's already kind of prepping people to start thinking how they can take advantage of electric technology in their lives. So Uranus and Gemini also, because it's in the third house, the rule of the third house, it's interesting because, yes, we're going to change our personal thinking. Everyone on an individual level over the next 7 years is going to, you're going to change your ideologies and self concept, but also ideologies at large. But because it's the rule of the third house, Uranus and Gemini is also bringing back early childhood nostalgia, no matter what generation you are, no matter how old you are, because the third house is early education, early childhood, kinder through 12th grade. The third house is all the way to the age of 18. So the next 7 years, you might personally, either it's intergenerational healing, intergenerational traveling, or you revisit your homeland, your family's homeland, or let's say you were in the middle of America and you moved to Australia. So people are going to want to go back and revisit again this nostalgia of childhood, and that goes back to even our hobbies. So Y2K, we're already kind of seeing that fashion wise trend. Um, but even like the hobbies and the culture from Y2K is going to come back, most especially just because millennials will be the one kind of living most of this nostalgic revival with Uranus and Gemini. But again, you can see it intergenerationally. We might even go back and um, it's interesting because it's like, in a weird way, because with Saturn and Aries, it's like this, how in the 50s and in the 60s, the government really pushed Americana, right? The trend in the culture of Americana. When we think of Americana, we think of the classic Coca-Cola, right? We think of milkshakes. We think of drive-in and diners and Sonic, right? The fast food chain Sonic, right? We're gonna see kind of like this old revival of Americana nostalgia come back through the decades, and us, people randomly pick up like, oh, I collect very old niche typewriters, or I collect very old automobiles, classic cars. Also with Uranus and Gemini are going to come back and be this very exotic, upscale, high-end kind of novelty of like, not everyone can have it, and those who do have it, right, because it's exclusive access. Anything that's high-end, anything that's luxurious, the reason being is because psychologically not everyone has access to it. And so again, Americana stuff, and really interesting, like I think Cuba will have some sort of very significant, with Uranus and Gemini, influence, obviously, with our governmental relations. But Cuba itself as a country, because it's very obviously, because of communism and all that stuff has been stuck in the past, hasn't been able to have access to the advancement of technology and modern society. So I think that Cuba will be a very big, interesting country that's going to have a very radical revolution over the next 7 years with Uranus and Gemini. I think Cuba will definitely be a topic of conversation. We can go on and on. There's so much about Uranus and Gemini. If you go to my Patreon, patreon.com, and it's Esoteric Essa, I have a free audio on there of what you can anticipate with Uranus and Gemini for all the mutable signs and then all zodiac signs. I go a little bit further with that. And I have a free email newsletter on my website, sluminati.com. You can sign up for that. But I wanted to come on here and just share tidbits of this. As obviously we progress, there's more to come. But let me know what your thoughts are, what your personal predictions are, also with Uranus and Gemini. And don't forget to subscribe and like. And thank you so much. I do offer one-on-one private astrology readings, so you can book natal chart with me, business sessions with me, private tarot sessions as well. All my services are available on my website. And yeah, have a great full moon, and I'll catch up with you later. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.